Hey everyone, Patrick Donahoe here. Hey, listen, this is going to be a fun video because I'm going to recap day one of a financial slash economic conference that I'm at. It's 6 days long, and so this is a recap of day one. I'm actually about to head down there in about 20 minutes for day two, but I wanted to recap this because, man, there was so much information here. So first off, the trip is a part of the Tony Robbins organization. It's called Platinum Partners, and it's a more tight-knit group that does about handful of events each year. And this is one of them, and it's one of the highlights, and it's the finance trip. So Tony, over the years, has brought in speakers like President Bush, President Clinton, Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, Ray Dalio, and a number of others. And if you look at just the audience that he has, there's such a wide scope of perspective when it comes to financial matters, economic matters, and this is of course no exception. This is an event that so far it's been incredible. We don't necessarily know who all the speakers are, but the surprise speaker we had last night was Tony Blair, who's the former Prime Minister of the UK, and it was an incredible, and I'll talk about some of his points in just a second. But I decided to join this group. It's a huge time commitment, huge financial commitment as well. And I joined it because of an experience I had back in December at one of his core events, which is called Date with Destiny. And Tony Robbins is not the flavor for everyone, and of course he's been around for quite some time, well over 3 decades. And in the personal development space, it's something that I'm really passionate about because I believe, in growth, and that it's just a natural component part of life, and it's something that I try to do all the time. And this environment that I'm in right now is tremendous. Is going to allow for some tremendous growth and being in an uncomfortable environment, and I'm super excited for that. But the December event, Date with Destiny, it was something that helped me connect the dots of a lot of different things related to my personality and my childhood and things that I did more unconsciously, and it strengthened the relationship with my wife, with my kids, and my wife and I, she's the one that actually encouraged me to come to join up with this group for a year, because I don't know, there's something about, there's just something about being able to make connections as to how you're subconsciously driven, and certain things that mean this or mean that, and once you're able to talk through it, you can really identify things that are nonsensical in a sense. And I definitely connected the dots there, and it changed me in a way that helped me realize what I was doing, and how it wasn't necessarily giving me the fulfillment or the level of happiness that I wanted. And I connected the dots and had some incredible breakthroughs with her. And so I decided to join this year. So I'm going to get to the financial conference now, because this is going to be this series. But you know what? The environment that I'm in right now is a incredibly high level environment. There are a few billionaires here. It is quite the financial commitment to actually pay for it, plus the time commitment that you make, and those that are here range from big business owners to developers, and it's all over the world. You have entrepreneurs in the technology space, entrepreneurs in the health and wellness space. Pretty much every industry is probably represented here, but so far, just rubbing shoulders and having these such high level conversations with people, it's not what I get to do every day, and it helps to expand my mind and help me grow and see what's possible for me. So let's kind of get into the main points now, based on what occurred yesterday for day one. Again, there's 6 days, and yesterday was just the first day, and there was a tremendous amount of information. It's almost complete immersion of financial and economic issues pretty much the entire time. So here are a few of my things. So first off, Tony Robbins has this saying about winter, and he talks about seasons when it comes to economic times, whether that's business cycle or political cycles or economic cycles, and there are different seasons. And so the first event I went to with Tony Robbins was Business Mastery, which was back in I believe 2015. which is exclusively focused on businesses. And back then he was talking about winter is coming. And if you look at, between now and then, I mean, essentially 40 years have transpired, yet there hasn't necessarily been a winter. And what's interesting is, Robert Kiyosaki and a lot of others, Peter Schiff, have really, looked at fundamentals associated with debt levels, with prices, with employment, with, the amount of capital flows there are. And man, and I've looked at this, I've looked at the same thing, and I've looked at, man, how could this continue to go on? How can the economy continue to do what it's doing? And the connection I made, which I've been thinking about for a while, which is one that we talked a little bit about, which came down to the influence of the world's central banks and the monetary policy that has allowed for, capital into different sectors and industries that has really helped weather the storm. And I'm not going to get into a ton of that. But I'm going to touch on a few points. So when it comes to central banks, central banks are allowed to create money and exchange them with, it's typically bonds or loans, and mostly government type of loans. And this money, essentially is to stimulate certain things, stimulate the economy. At the same time, there's always unintended consequences, and this really goes to the Austrian business cycle theory, where it is essentially derived, booms and busts are derived from monetary policy, from central banks, because the same time as you increase demand, right, which is the idea behind this type of economic phenomenon, which is injecting capital in the market where money exists that didn't exist before, which now can, increase the demand for whatever the case may be. But, the unintended consequences that I've been thinking about is, first and foremost, student loans. Student loans are, essentially loans that are guaranteed primarily by the government, and has allowed for lending to individuals that otherwise would not be credit worthy, and given higher demand for school, and hence the reason why tuition rates have gone up so much. Plus, you have a massive generation of younger people, right, who have been able to take on these loans and essentially use them to pay for college with really not much as far as strings attached, other than they have to pay it back at some point in the future and can't bankrupt out of it. And this has really caused a lot of unintended consequences around how expensive school is, as well as defaults on student loans, but also a tremendous burden of payments, which individuals are not able to essentially spend money on homes or spend money on extracurricular activities and so forth. But also, I would say the biggest thing, that's not even my biggest concern. My biggest concern is the amount of bond debt that has essentially increased, where you have companies that are essentially financing stock buyback. So they'll go out and they'll issue new bonds at really low interest rates and buy back stock, which helps keep prices of the stock market as high as they've been. And then finally, you have a junk bond. This sector, which are not investment grade bonds, and typically, I won't get into the rating of bonds, but it comes down to the strength of a company. But junk bonds, are essentially high risk companies who are taking on debt to fund their operations. And these days, if you look around the tech world, there's a tremendous amount of capital flowing into this industry, and these businesses are reliant on debt to operate, and they don't have profits. And you look at just what it does. I mean, I'll speak personally to it. In the Salt Lake City market, where there's tremendous growth in tech. There are apartments everywhere. People are moving in from California, Nevada, everywhere, and a lot of it is because of the demand of these tech companies, which is first and foremost being funded by debt, not necessarily profitability. And so, if you look at junk bonds, these are bonds that don't necessarily have long-term maturities, and so when they start to be due, and businesses can't necessarily pay off the loan, they're going to roll that and refinance that debt, roll that loan into another bond, and who knows what interest rates are going to be at that point in time. But it's a very thin ice when you think about it. But as I was saying this in the Salt Lake market, what it's done is it's bid up the price of employees, and it's also created tremendous demand in the technology sector, mainly in software development and IT. And it's hurt me, and I'm not saying that I'm the only one, and I'm not, crying in my soup, but, it's provided, really difficult scenarios where we essentially have employees that we'd like to hire, but we can't necessarily afford them because of what they're getting paid from other businesses that don't operate on profit. They operate on having tremendous amounts of debt. So that's another thing too, which is just really interesting, is that the point is, central banks have really fueled capital into different sectors and have allowed the market to continue without correction, without business failure, and so forth. So that was a really interesting thing that kind of kept going through my head yesterday. And I'm gonna probably link a video that was played, which was done by Dalio, which is entitled "How the Economic Machine Works," which is pretty good as far as how he looks at things. And how I look at it is more, I look at the fundamentals of what he talked about, and it's all spot on. However, whether it's right or wrong, it's such an interesting debate, because central bank policy and their role when it comes to society, is not what it was intended originally, and has really created some turmoil in my mind. Yet it's one of those things where if it went under, the whole society could potentially be in some rough shape. Anyway, I'm not gonna go off on those tangents. So a few other things that I'd like to talk about. I mean, he's still Tony is still firmly believing that winter is coming, and nobody really knows timeline there. But he really talked about those that thrive during those uncertain times are the ones that have a strong mindset. They're able to understand and have certainty associated with the fundamentals of their financial situation, so that they can really take advantage of uncertainty. Because most people aren't prepared for uncertainty. Most people, essentially react to things, not necessarily respond. And responding definitely takes some discipline when it comes to mindset and controlling that, especially during uncertain times. And okay, let's keep going here. Another few things that stood out to me. I'm just going through all the things that I started for the podcast / video series. But right now, some of the things that are indicative of thin ice is 15% of the entire the working population of Americans has more than a year saved for retirement. The increasing socialistic perspective of millennials is very concerning, because right now, especially with our political environment, there are just some really radical things that are being proposed, and without really an understanding of economic principles. And it's really interesting. One of the highlights they made was Amazon, and what happened in New York, where Amazon pulled out, for a number of reasons, but it mainly had to do with the ignorance associated with politicians, and also just I think one of the main straws that broke the camel's back was unionization, where the New York employees were demanding that all employees of Amazon, who were promising I think like 25,000 jobs or so, were demanding a union. And so Amazon was like, okay, well, if you guys are going to dictate the terms of how our business is supposed to be run, then we're not going to move to New York. And that's ultimately what happened. But anyway, it's just one of those things where if you look at the different the angles that the political environment and the lobbying is taking, it just from an economic standpoint, it just made no sense. And so there's a lot of hate to use the word ignorance, but there's a massive lack of understanding when it comes to economics. And even though certain ideals are being stood by, the fundamentals of how those ideals play into the economic scheme of things is just not understood, and typically they've been tried before and have failed. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's keep going here. Another thing is, media, the media, and how most of it's negative and very polarizing, and the concepts and things that are propagated, are really hot buttons. And it was interesting. There's a bunch of UK people here, and listening to them talk after Tony Blair spoke last night in regards to what he said, which was really talking about his stance on Brexit. And I'm not gonna get into a lot of those details, but right now we're within 30 days of a deadline, and really the lack of preparedness of that vote as far as having alternatives to trade and so forth. Again, it comes down to that same principle, where there were these hot buttons, And for better or for worse, I'm not taking a stance on Brexit. I think Brexit, fundamentally, philosophically makes a lot of sense to me. Where sovereign nations should be sovereign and not necessarily responsible for the bad decisions of others. So from that standpoint, Brexit makes a lot of sense to me. But at the same time, because of the system that exists, it puts the UK in a horrible position because renegotiating trade and a lot of other issues associated with supply chain and commerce was never taken into consideration. It really comes down to making hot buttons in regards to philosophical things, but then the actual execution of it is not understood by politicians. And this henceforth is the reason why Brexit, we're 3 years in and they don't know what to necessarily do. And they brought up Tony brought up the issue with Venezuela, same thing, where the nationalization of assets, whether it's petroleum assets or business assets, right? It's during economic wins, you have politicians and those that are in government that don't understand operations, supply chain, and economics, and therefore don't know what to do when certain uncertainties occur. And so it's really interesting to see the state of Venezuela right now, but also centrally planned governments. If you look at ours, there's a lot of smart people in there, but a lot of those that are just very good at speaking and also good at talking about hot buttons that get people in the short term emotionally riled up, but yet don't necessarily have the experience or the wherewithal to understand how economics fits into certain decisions and policies and so forth. All right, so a few other things, maybe getting into some personal development things. I look at something that I would say I'm lacking, or I have lacked in the past, where I always looked at goals being somewhat limiting, where I held myself to a certain standard and never gave myself the opportunity to rise above that. But I look at having vision as far as what you want for your life, vision of where you want to be, and that's kind of your North Star. And then you have certain milestones and goals along the way. And typically that North Star isn't necessarily a dollar amount or it's a type of home, or it's a bank account balance, right, or something with business. I look at those end vision type of goals, and it's the way you want to live, and that becoming your North Star allows you that vision of the future, so that you can deal or I would say not even deal. You can really understand unemotionally, without being emotionally attached to the different uncertainties of life, and make the right decision at the time. And so having goals that essentially become that that focal point, which allow you to see between the minutia that exists in society, whether it's news or social media, whatever noise can be defined as. So I thought that was really, really powerful. And then creation mindset versus management mindset. Most people are in management mindset, which is it's dealing with the here and now, and looking at circumstances and putting a definition on circumstances that is one bias, but not necessarily the full the full bias. And so the creation mindset is looking at all circumstances and knowing that there's opportunity there. And I think taking that mindset is difficult because our emotions oftentimes control our control reactions, and so the discipline associated with understanding a creative mind and being able to take measures on a daily basis to rewire your subconscious so that you look at a glass half full as opposed to half empty. I thought that was really, really powerful. And then I'm going to talk about an elevated environment. I talked about that in the beginning with the group that's here, and just the level that they think at, the level of their business. And I oftentimes have referred to an experience in my life where I was younger. I was playing hockey in college and went to a training camp for the San Jose Sharks that they sponsored in Minnesota. And I remember the first time I stepped out on the ice, and the caliber of play was represented in just the practice sessions and how fast they were. And it was like full speed for me, but yet it was in practice or warm up. And I remember over the course of that week, just the game that I had became better because of the elevated environment that I was in. And so that was referred to quite often yesterday, obviously being the first day. But what was interesting, there was several comments where those again that did reach certain goals, and it's kind of Tony referred to it as satiation, where you essentially get bored, right? You reach a certain level, you accomplish certain things, and there was nothing, you didn't have anything beyond that. And so being in this environment oftentimes inspires growth. It looks at, icons who have accomplished a lot more than you, and what they're doing about it. I mean, Tony, I would say, it's incredible what this guy does. But if you look at some of the things that are inspiring to him now, a lot of it is, most of it's charity. Actually, all of it's for charitable purposes. And right now he's co-sponsoring an X Prize, which is a prize and that has to do with Peter Diamandis' organization. What they do is, they essentially have rewards and prizes associated with innovation. So the innovation that Tony is sponsoring is essentially to have a way to grow from stem cells meat, beef particularly, and basically the background to that is just the emerging markets, and whether it's India or Africa or China, and the demand because of the growing middle class there, for more luxury. And in this case, it starts with food. And if you look at cows or cattle and the amount of water that they consume and the amount of gas that they're putting into the ecosystem, there's just simply not enough. And so the prize is to essentially, create this meat. Now it's already been created, but right now I believe it's like $3,500 a pound. And so the X Prize is to get it to $1 per pound. And again, this is same tastes, taste and everything, nutritional elements. Anyway, it's kind of a weird idea, but Facebook stepped into that realm as well, and they are doing they have an initiative for fish and chicken. Believe it or not. So it's interesting where my point behind explaining that is that here are human beings fundamentally have to grow. If you're not growing, you're dying. I mean, we've talked about that a million times on the podcast. And so in this video, it's just going to repeat that. It's whatever you're at in life, okay, and you're going to grow and you're going to reach certain milestones, but it doesn't mean that's the end. We are kind of hardwired to continue to make progress, to add to what we know. And if we don't have that vision, we're going to hit this point where there isn't the fulfillment that we desire. And so whether you believe that or not is besides the point, but I would definitely research it, because it's indicative of a lot of different social issues, especially when it comes down to those that are values driven and mission driven, and those that are ideals driven. It's really a really interesting conversation. But the idea, wow, some snow is falling out here. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because he is just he's the epitome. Tony Robbins is like the epitome of continuing to push the limits, and right now what's really inspiring him is more of a charitable cause, which is very inspiring to me. Okay, so let's do a few other things since I'm running kind of short here on time. All right, this is another. Let's see. Okay. There's some good kind of statements that were made. Stress comes from making something more important than it really is. And failure comes from making certain things not as important as they really are. So I'll repeat those two. Stress comes from making something more important than it really is. Failure comes from making certain things not as important as they really are. So and they spent 3 hours with this woman who's just having a really hard time with her 15-year-old teenager. And it came down to the 3 decisions that you make. The first decision is what you're going to focus on. Second decision is what does it mean? And third decision is what are you going to do? What am I going to do? So the focus is that big thing. I mentioned that before, right? If you're focusing on lack or what's missing, then there's always going to be disappointment there. But if you're focused on things that you already have, right, the blessings that you have where you are. If you look at just the American life compared to the average of the world, okay, the average world lives on a couple dollars a day. And if you look at those that make over, I think the statistic was those that make over $60,000 a year are in the 0.1% of the wealthy of the entire world. So if you step back and you focus on what you have, whether it's your children or your family or your health, anything, okay, that mindset right there allows you to approach difficulty and decisions that you have to make with a more abundance mindset. He also talked about loss as an illusion, and the fact that disruption always creates new opportunities. The experiencing mind and the remembering mind, man, those are incredible concepts. The experiencing mind, keeping the mind alive is the key to a happy life, which I think is the balance between certainty and uncertainty. Certainty, which is some of the fundamentals of life, whether it's finance or relationships, just the fundamentals and values, moral sense. But the experience side of things all has to do with uncertainty. We hate, we don't like boredom. We want new things. We want, variety. Okay. At the same time, sometimes that can cause undue uncertainty, too much stress and failure, right? Because the principle of certainty isn't necessarily understood or established. And then I'm going to end with, I'll end some things with money, and then that's it. So the money exercise was profound for me. The money exercise is, you have to basically just answer without thinking these following questions. What is money? And then money's not. Money really is. Money really isn't. What is rich? What is wealthy? Wealth is not. Wealth is. I am. And then I really, or what is wealth? What really is wealth? Anyway, these are questions where it was interesting because you're forced to not think about the answer, and it really was interesting to see others' response. Now, because I'm in the money game and the wealth game, I've really made the connection between wealth and who you are, and it being, essentially a receipt of the value that you create. But people have these like subconscious issues that really hold them back when it comes to money, because there is this notion that money is evil. Money is the root of all evil. Money's not everything. The rich are greedy. The rich exploit and take advantage of people. Right. So I think there's these like social stigmas out there when it comes to money. And I'm not saying that there are people that aren't that, but I really think if you look at those that have really truly are in those positions and the value that they've created for society, it's empowering. But oftentimes, because there's this essentially a subconscious belief about money that comes from just the influence that we have in society, you can really fall into some hard times. All right, let me talk about Tony Blair. Then I got to go because they're going to open up the doors. I'm not going to have a good seat, so I got to get down there. Listen, it was Tony Blair is one of those guys where I didn't know much about him. Obviously being a political figure. I believe during the 90s and the 2000s, but what really hit to me was how he spoke and how you can kind of sense his care for what he was doing, and not necessarily as prime minister, but that of course that, but also what he's doing now, which is really helping with emerging markets, whether it's Africa or India, and what's going on there, and how rapidly evolving these societies and economies are. And Tony went into a lot of questions regarding decisions and hard times and how he dealt with that, and it was interesting. There was some congruence associated with Tony's philosophy when it comes to focusing on the things that are good and focusing on things that you can control. But he talked a lot about leadership, which I think hit home for me, which is, leaders have a group that revolves around them. They're not afraid to question their assumptions and decisions, because when a decision is made, then everybody stands behind them. And I look at that was really impactful for me. Let's see. I said the hardest part is having the instinct to change and then making the decision. So this is a difficulty, when it comes to a person's instinct, and then also, what is good for the constituency that's being represented in the specific decision, which, for you, it could be a business, it could be your investments, it could be your family. But I really look at the development of your mind and the development of its discipline to focus on good things, to have a principle-based approach, to have a mission-driven approach. And as you continually focus on that and really sear into your subconscious those values, it will, essentially be your foundation when it comes to hard decisions. And this is definitely the case when it comes to a rapidly evolving world. And so it was awesome. I wouldn't say that there was anything like mind blowing that he talked about. He had some funny stories about tripping on the carpet and almost knocking the queen over when he was being confirmed or anointed or knighted. I don't know what you call it. But that was interesting. But it is I think you can really tell when a person's heart is in their mission, and that was really evident when Tony Blair spoke. All right, everyone. All right, day one is in the books. Now we're going to go hit up day two, and I'll give you an update tomorrow. See ya.